I actually don't know where this is played out of. I don't know where it's played out of, but it's 2-5 and it's 1300 effective. So 2-5, 1300 effective, and we get a situation here where there are two limps, and the hero is on the button with 7-8 of diamonds and raises it up here to 35. So, it's not even really on the larger side, a little bit on the larger side, right? Like maybe somebody goes 20, you add like 5 to each one. So he goes to 35 over 2 limps, which I think is really the cusp of when you want to start isolating. I think once it gets more than, 3 limps, I would probably start to develop an over limp range on the button as opposed to ISOing. I always tell people, and they always say, whoa, in like these multi-way games, what do you over limp, if anything? And I say, once there's 2 or 3 people that have limped in, when I'm in late position, then I'll start to raise the hands that I would raise like in the first few positions, which is probably going to be like 8s plus, ace jack, ace, something, whatever that is, right? In that particular spot, and then develop an over limp. Although if you are playing in a highly dropped game like in Southern California, it's quite possible that over limping is just not profitable at all when they're taking $7-8 from the pot, which I think is much worse on any flop, which is actually much worse than a rake game where they're taking 10% up to even 10. So the villain in the big blind is the only caller. So the limpers fold and the big blind calls. So now the pot is like 85, something like that. So the limpers fold. And the flop comes out queen, queen, 8. So it's queen, queen, 8 here. Queen, queen, 8 with 2 clubs. And obviously the big blind checks. And the hero decides to bet 25 into, I had 85, it's about 80. 25 into about 80 for a bit of protection, which I think is totally fine. You obviously want to protect against an 8 here, right? You don't want to let a free card come out. And the villain check raises to 85. So queen of clubs, queen of hearts, 8 of clubs, front door clubs, check 85. And, if you're the hero and you bet here with 7-8 of diamonds, you'd like to have a backdoor, but I think that you have to continue here. And now, obviously, the big blind can have a queen. It's possible. But there are many draws out here, too. Front door clubs. There's some straight draws like Jack 9, Jack 10, 9, 10. I'm certainly not folding right now. So the hero does call. And the turn is the ace of spades. So the turn is the ace of spades. And I think this is inflection point number 1 here, too, from this particular guy. Pot is just around 240, something like that. And now the villain continues for a $140 bet, which is right under 2/3. And I think sometimes as a player, we can get caught up in putting somebody on a hand as opposed to thinking about what your equity is against their entire range of hands here. What your entire range of hands here is. Because we can be like, oh, I don't really think this guy would fast play a queen, all that much, right? I don't think this guy would fast play a queen. He's really, really weighted towards draws. Like maybe once in a while he has a queen. But the problem here, I think for 7-8, which is actually the same problem for a lot of pairs on a queen, queen, 8 ace board here, is that you can now get counterfeit quite a bit. So there are extra outs. If you say, I'm going to put this guy squarely on like Jack 10 of clubs, 9, 10 of clubs, Jack 9 of clubs, something like that, he can obviously now catch one of those over cards. So 8x is much, much worse than having, say, like queens or jacks here. Forget about the blocking properties that you would have with some of those draws. But not only could he catch one of the over cards to an 8, but, it could come out an ace here too, and you'd get counterfeit. Like if this guy's got Jack 10 of clubs or 9, 10 of clubs here, he could have as many as 9 flush outs, another, 6 pair outs, that's 15, and another 2 offsuit aces if we don't double count the ace of clubs. It could be 17 or 18 outs with 1 card to come. That's a lot of equity on a draw with 1 card to come. And then if he has some queen X, you can see he only needs to have queen X just a little bit. So I think I fold here. to be perfectly honest, I don't think that his hand is strong enough to continue here once the ace comes. Now, do I think that a guy would have ace X of clubs here? Maybe once in a while, but I tend to doubt it if ace X of club is check raised as the nut flush draw. And then I think this is reflected a lot of times with a check here in this particular spot, as opposed to him continuing to fire here for 140. So I think if I put myself in the hero's particular spot here, I probably fold, even though he is getting, it's one, it's about, the pot's about 380-ish, 140 for him to call. So he's getting about 2.5 to 1, but I just don't think that he has the equity if you put just a little bit of queen X in here. But hero calls. So obviously the hero thinks this guy's on a draw. He's got to have a specific read that he's on a draw. So now the pot is about 525 as we go to the river, and the river is the 10 of hearts. So now we're fucked entirely. And I want to take this did not happen, but I'm going to run this through in a couple of different scenarios. A couple of different scenarios here is, let's say that now with the river being 525, the guy checks. So he check raised the flop on queen, queen 8. He continued to fire on the turn, and now he checks the river. I think you have to bluff here. You have to turn 8x into a bluff to get him off of a 10. Now, this is not a spot, though, where I feel if I can safely discount the fact that he has ace X here through his turn sizing of nut flush draws, then, and I don't think he's checking all that much with a queen. Now, maybe, occasionally, but let's say he's not going to fold a queen here. Say he's got queen 3 suited and now he's getting all scared and he checks the river. We're not going to get him off of a queen, right? With the pot being 525. So when you bluff on the river, you don't have to go overbet pot all the time. We're really looking to clean up a 10 here. And if he's ever getting tricky with some other hand, like he boated queen 10, he has a queen that he wasn't folding, or he's made jack 9 or some bullshit like that, he's not folding those anyways. So we risk less on the bluff. But if he were to check here, we need to clean up jack 10. We need to clean up 9-10, which a lot of those hands that we thought that he might have as combo draws. By the way, jack 10 also double guts the turn. You might see some representation of, if somebody's structuring correctly, jack 10 suited with the backdoor. It's not just jack 10 of clubs. Pairs the end and now checks. So if this guy checked at the end here, I would bet maybe 175. I don't think you'd have to go that much further than that. But I think checking behind would be a lazy check behind. I think you absolutely need to clean up 10x here. So that's number one that I think that is really interesting about that. Now, that did not happen, though. What actually happened is V1 bets 400. Now, obviously, we can't call, right? We can't call here. But the question is, going back to hand reading, this is what the guy who submitted the hand talked about, is could he raise as a bluff here on the river? And I thought it was interesting. I ran it by Squish My Tomato Mark Goon, because I'm not usually thinking about bluff raising at these stakes all that much. But what I will say that I think is really, really important is go back to preflop and sort of configuration, and we can make a lot of good deductions here, which is, of course, that the guy called our raise in the big blind with limpers behind. We can pretty much almost always logically deduce that he isn't going to have pocket aces, right? And, he very well probably doesn't have a whole lot of ace queen either. It's possible. I think whether or not it's more likely that he 3-bets ace queen with limpers or not, or if it just got folded to the button and he 3-bet ace queen, it's probably more likely that he would 3-bet ace queen from the, big blind versus button heads up, even though it probably should slightly be a little bit the other way around with the limpers. But let's just say, for the theory's sake, that he doesn't have much ace queen. He doesn't have pocket queens. We know he's not going to have pocket aces, right? So we can throw those hands out. So I think it really becomes very important, the fact that we have an 8 here too in our hand, because now that just blocks 2/3 of the pocket 8s. So we don't have to worry about and like him flopping queen 8 here. So it's really important that we block that. So now that he doesn't have aces, he doesn't have much ace queen at all and then have to play it tricky. We're blocking boats here too. Now it's really, can we represent those hands and get somebody, possibly to fold? Like, would Jack 9 suited here fold? Would Queen Jack fold? And, would King Queen fold here? Like I said, Squish My Tomato says that at these stakes, bluffing is the new value betting if you're playing in a nitty game. The only thing that I would say here is you got to watch, obviously, the pot size, because here, the guy, after he bets 400 here, he's got about like maybe 700 left. So the hero has about 1100 here moving to the river. So if hero were to jam, the pot would be 2000 and it would be about 700 for V1 to call. So pot would be 2,700 for V1 to call. And the question is, as you can extrapolate this out, can you get someone to fold an unfold queen here? Can you get someone to fold here, a hand like Jack 9, King Jack? Obviously, I think it's unlikely. If he was just plowing through with the 10 because he thought he needed to bluff, then he's going to fold that. But could you get those hands to fold? And I think as you sort of extend the stack sizes outward, say you started with 2,000 instead of like 1,300, where you were deeper now. So instead of having, 1,100 here on the river, you had 1,800 on the river. So now when he bets 4 in a 525 and you jam, the pot's 27.25 and it's like 1,400 for him to call. Does he make that fold at that point then too? So I think that in this particular spot, you might be just a little bit shallow if you're the hero to make this play. But if you put all the things together and you were just a little bit deeper, I actually do like a bluff raise here. But obviously a queen X has to fold, a straight has to fold. So are you up against those types of people that would do that? Most likely not at 3-1, but maybe at 2-1, or larger, where someone's going 400 and you're jamming in for 2,000, right? So it all comes back to, like, do you have that blocker that blocks a lot of the value? So if you're in a situation where your hand connects with the board in a way where you're blocking a lot of the super thick value, and you can go back to preflop configuration and realize that you have the very, very thick nut hands and the opponent doesn't, that's how you want to structure a river bluff. Hero ended up folding, which I think is far better than calling, that's for sure. So hero folds, and we don't know what the villain had, but I thought that was a good little lesson about how we might structure a river bluff in a given scenario.